So in this video, I want to share with you probably the single most important tool that I've come up with in doing agentic development. And for backstory, over the last 6 months, I've worked with multiple teams, including a lot of my own personal projects, trying to figure out how agentic development should and can work. And every single time, basically at scale, there's too much drift, it starts to fall apart, and eventually it starts to do more damage than good. So what we've come up with is a concept called policy as code. And you can picture this as essentially a massive linting system that was never really feasible before the use of AI. It takes deterministic scripts and pairs them with non-deterministic AI rules, and together you can start to actually achieve agentic development at scale. That's what I'm going to introduce today in the video, and we'll get into it. Okay, so I've put together a couple slides to go through this to explain the concepts here, but essentially AI development has this like 80-20 problem, which is that 80% of the time it does really great, but then like 20% of the time it doesn't. And the problem with that is that 20% starts to eat away. So I have a little example right here where you can illustrate this. So like AI is extremely pattern based. When there is code in a code base, even if it's not best practice, AI will absolutely always copy that code, generally even when there are rules and other things telling it not to. And the problem becomes with the 80-20 rule is that it gets worse over time, right? If some bad anti-patterns end up in your code, and more agentic things are going to start copying it. So by the time you're in month 3, you have massive problems. And you can see this, and I've tried to illustrate this, where like you ship one bad thing, it's now in the code base, which is providing context. The next session, AI tries to match the patterns in your code base and it ships more bad things, right? And it causes all kinds of problems. And so the nice thing, and this is where like the whole world's talking about this is a known problem. There's a lot of people trying to do it. And like, I don't claim to be an expert in any way on AI when it comes to the LLM architecture and stuff like that. I can only tell you what I've used and everything. Anthropic, OpenAI, they're all releasing boatloads of tools to try to constrain AI to follow patterns, rules, etc., right? You have all your system prompts, you have IDE rules files, you have custom instructions, memories, skills/last commands, right? Like all of these things. And like the problem is that they are, as I understand it, still just simply trying to constrain a non-deterministic system. So you can certainly guide a non-deterministic system, but trying to actually constrain a non-deterministic system is super, super hard. And so you also have other things you can do. You could add hooks, work tree branches, prompt templates, like all these other things. We actually use hooks, but part of it with the scripts. But the short answer is you also have tests, which is like more like the business side of things. You have your traditional linters. Like all of these are trying to basically create constraints around the code. And there's 4 reasons in a variety of things why none of them like completely close the gap. In many cases, they're advisory, not gating, right? So, or in that case, like when they're human, right? And humans miss things. A lot of the problems is because even when you run rules, it's still inherently non-deterministic. Patterns be principle in the sense that ultimately it always, when you introduce bad stuff, seems to follow patterns. So like even when you have rules fighting it, patterns will still win. And then syntactical chess, mixture, structural drift. So this is the closest thing. So a lot of people in this video are going to basically be like, some of what you're arguing like already exists with like linters and stuff like that. And that's super true. And also like, I'm sure there's other people doing similar things to this, and like, that's totally fine. Like I'm not trying to claim that I am some kind of genius that knows how to do anything like crazy. But what I will tell you is that what I want to talk about, which is policy as code, which is a term that I've come up with and could have addressing this, is this, but like wildly beyond the scope of traditionally what it's been. So what is policy as code? Policy as code is basically the idea that you introduce a deterministic floor under the non-deterministic stack. So what I'm trying to do, and what I would tell you, and we're going to do future videos about this, I have a lot of evidence at this point to show, is that if you can take agentic development, use all of the tools available to you, like rules, documentation, everything like that, and then pair it with this concept of policy as code, you can actually do agentic development at scale because you avoid introducing anti-patterns, drift, all of the problems that come up with it, and it actually works. I'll show you some stats and examples in other future videos. But basically, like under every soft constraint you already have, there is essentially patterns. And so the influence for policy as code is the idea that coding at its core is essentially just massive amounts of patterns, right? And the question is, why wouldn't we have done this in the first place? The reason why is because in one of my suites, the policy as code rule set is almost 100,000 lines now, right? Because it has almost 800 different rules it governs. But what I would tell you is that code base now is unbelievably clean comparatively to many of my other code bases. And a lot of those rules I'm now reusing for other code bases. So for example, that's an Elixir code base. I've got, like the 700 or 800 rules in it. And I'll show you some of the examples of what these rules are, but it governs everything from architecture to where raw CSS is allowed to live to what's allowed to import what. And the key thing about this, by the way, I'll mention before I go further is like, I don't think the policy as code, like my rule set, should just be applied to you. I think what this tool is a tool that you write based on the vision for your app, based on the architecture for your app, based on all of the little nuances in your app. Some of these rules should be hyper specific to your app and your world, not something that's just, hey, here is the problem that everyone else has, which actually speaks to a larger problem in the world of AI. Like I see all these AI factories and all this other stuff. And a lot of people are trying to take these like spec-driven development templates and all these other development templates, and they're like trying to solve it top down where there's, oh, this is a factory or something like that. What I'm trying to simply say is this is a concept works, but absolutely I can't give you a set of rules that solves it for you. But to continue on. So you have AI generates code, you have their prompt layer, your tooling layer, your code checks. This is probably everything you're familiar with, right? Which is great. All we're introducing is basically this policy as code concept, which after every time AI starts to make changes, it runs policy as code rules. And in this case, and I can show you a little bit more in a second, and we're going to have a couple how-to videos, but it basically scans the entire code base. When you're doing it at scale, we end up caching some of those findings too. So there's all kinds of interesting things you can do there, but it scans the whole code base. You basically have a bunch of rules mapped to the evidence that it's gathering, and then it basically flags drift. That's all it does. And shockingly, even with all of these rules, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, almost every single time AI is writing code, it gets caught, it breaks policies. Even when you tell it these policies exist, right? It's every single time. And it's oftentimes only like 10 or 12 errors, but it's almost every single time. And so what you'll find is that it's remarkably effective out of the gate. We're going to get more into detail on this, but it's only as good as the rules you write. Also, people chronically underestimate the number of rules they have to write. Basically, it's upwards of probably thousands of rules possibly, but to be fair, you can do that in an afternoon if like you have a very strong architecture mind of what you want. Like to me with like Playwright, for example, I have a policy as code engine for Playwright. I had my whole rule set done, basically within a day or two. And I was very confident that as long as it passes all of these rules, the Playwright stuff is going to be good. Okay, so what does it on steroids actually mean? First, it reads stuff, right? Compiles all your artifacts. Then it packages it into different scopes. It catches things like architectural drift, contract violations, cross-module coupling, etc. Right? What are rules? A bunch of different things. Generally speaking, I separate unit tests. Some of this is just frankly AI generated because I don't have a ton of time, but it's typed evidence. I'm going to show you more examples. 4 tiers. So we have hard fails. We have some kind of a warning concept. Generally speaking, I prefer hard fails. And then basically we do offer the idea of a waiver concept. So one of the things that like I think developers are going to tell me is there's always exceptions or whatever. We do allow an exception concept, but we also like basically say you're not allowed to do exceptions without putting in permission. And then we also have the ability to audit what are exceptions and where are they, because it tries to cheat all the time. It's also worth noting, by the way, that when you're doing policy as codes, you actually have to have a whole set of policies designed to catch it cheating, because a very common thing is it will write something like in a wrapper or something like that just to put it in the right file location, even though the other file is in the wrong one. Okay, before I do this, I just want to basically kind of show what this actually means, right? So every dimension your engine can govern. So in one of our code bases, our policy is codes. Yeah, this one has, it's the Elixir one I was talking about. It has like 700 or 800 rules-ish, right? And these rules basically verify everything about the code as it's doing it. Everything from visual boundaries to architecture to data, like legitimately down to how it imports, what observability things are. We're actually going as far as making our rules dictate that when it's writing stuff, it has to write certain documentation as part of it. So like, for example, we're requiring that module level docs in every module, right? and the rules are doing this. And so what it does is it basically as if it's like having a really experienced developer determine every possible standard. And then as your code is doing this, it does it. Now, it pairs with all your other traditional things. It pairs with your test automation where you're verifying all your business logic. It pairs with a human who actually knows what they're doing this. But it simply is a tool that like stops drift, right? And so what I don't want you to take away is that I'm trying to say that this is like the tool that allows agentic development by itself to just go ham. But what I will tell you is that as a human, when I'm trying to do this level of review and PRs over something that agentic code wrote, I always clearly am missing this stuff because I have signed off on things that like when I went and then ran my policy set against it, like it caught things. So it's just a level of cleanliness that's huge. So you can see dev, AI, CI/CD, and main. It's probably hard to read this on the screen. I can try to make it a little bit bigger. But basically, when AI is doing it and you have your PR, you basically just have to run it. Basically, it has errors. You say address all the errors, and then you go for it. That's the core of the idea, and I'm going to do a lot more videos on this. I'm going to probably try to do some metrics on this too. But basically, a policy rule is a module where declared metadata and one predicate function. The concept ports cleanly into any ecosystem. And then basically, all it is the rule. It's basically looking for, is the code matching a pattern that you're supposed to do? Yeah, so with policy as code in front of the merge, worst of AI-generated code is still structurally legal, but bad patterns can't propagate, they merge. So yeah, to give you more concept on what this is. So this is a video of what this is and why it exists. It's more of an intro to the concept. I'm going to do another video on like how to do it at scale, like from an architecture perspective. And then I'll do another video on like how to get started with it. This concept paired with some of the agentic pipeline stuff that we've been doing in terms of building bespoke agentic pipelines is really, in my mind, the two most impactful things that we've done for actually being able to do agentic development at scale. And yeah, I think it really is an interesting idea. I know there's a lot of like similar things. I'd love to get your feedback. Cool. Yeah, that's all I got for today. My name's Ben Fellows. I run a company called Loop. You can check us out at workwithloop.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and pretty active there. Would love your thoughts. Talk soon.